Hello, everyone. My name is Trevor Brooks, and today I'm going to share something with you that I've kept buried for the last 7 years, something that cost me my sanity, my career, and nearly my life. I worked as a security guard at Area 51, and what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about that place. 3 weeks into my assignment, I discovered a door that wasn't supposed to exist, and behind it, I found something that the government has been hiding for decades, something that's still watching me, even now, as I tell you this story. Now, before I begin, I can see that 80% of my viewers didn't subscribe while watching my videos, so please, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another story. Also, comment down below and tell me where you're watching this video from and what time it is for you right now. I absolutely love hearing from you all. And if you have your own paranormal or mysterious story, please email us or leave it in the comments. I'd love to feature it on the channel. Alright, let's get into this. My name is Trevor Brooks, and in the spring of 2016, I was 28 years old, fresh out of a private security contract in Europe, and desperately looking for work that paid well enough to clear my debts. I had spent 3 years working at various facilities, museums, corporate buildings, even a pharmaceutical lab outside of Berlin, but nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what came next. The job posting was vague, almost suspiciously so. It listed a position for high-level security personnel at a government facility in Nevada, with a salary that made my eyes water. 6 figures, full benefits, housing provided, and a non-disclosure agreement that was thicker than a phone book. I should have known right then that something was off, but desperation makes you overlook red flags. The interview process took 3 months. Background checks, psychological evaluations, polygraph tests, medical exams. They wanted to know everything about me, my childhood, my relationships, my political beliefs, even my dreams. I remember sitting in a sterile white room somewhere in Langley, answering the same questions over and over again to different people in suits who never smiled, never blinked, just watched me with eyes that seemed to calculate every micro-expression on my face. One particular interview still haunts me. It was with a man who never gave his name, just showed me his credentials, and sat down across from me in that windowless room. He asked me strange questions, not the typical security clearance stuff, but deeply personal things. "Have you ever seen something you couldn't explain, Trevor?" he asked, his pen hovering over his notepad. "Have you ever felt like you were being watched, even when you were alone?" I laughed it off at the time, told him no. Told him I was a rational person who didn't believe in ghosts or conspiracy theories. He just nodded and made a note, and moved on to the next question. But I remember the look in his eyes, like he knew something I didn't, like he was testing me for something specific. Finally, in late August, I received a phone call. A woman's voice, cold and professional, told me I'd been selected. She gave me 48 hours to accept and made it crystal clear that once I signed, there was no backing out. Not for at least 5 years. I signed the papers the next morning, my hand trembling slightly as I put pen to paper, feeling like I was signing my soul away. They flew me out to Nevada on an unmarked plane. No logos, no flight attendants, just 2 silent men in dark suits who handed me noise-canceling headphones and gestured for me to sleep. I tried to stay awake, to see where we were going, but exhaustion overtook me. And when I woke up, we were already descending through thick clouds into darkness. When we landed, it was night, and I was driven for what felt like hours through empty desert roads, no signs, no lights, just endless darkness and the occasional jackrabbit caught in the headlights. The driver never spoke, never looked at me in the rearview mirror, just kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead as we drove deeper and deeper into the Nevada wasteland. The facility, they never called it Area 51, at least not to our faces, rose from the desert like a massive concrete tomb. Floodlights illuminated chain-link fences topped with razor wire, guard towers every 100 meters, and cameras everywhere. The main entrance was a reinforced steel gate that required 3 separate security checks just to pass through. At each checkpoint, armed guards would examine my papers, scan my retinas, and wave us through without a word. I was taken to security barracks, a long, low building with small windows and concrete walls. My room was barely larger than a prison cell, a bed, a desk, a lamp, and a small bathroom. No television, no radio, no outside communication devices allowed. They confiscated my phone at the gate, along with my laptop, my watch, and even my wedding ring. Not that I was married, but they took anything metal or electronic. The first night, I couldn't sleep. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of generators and the occasional footsteps in the hallway outside. I lay in that narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had gotten myself into, wondering if the money was really worth it. Around 3 a.m, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Singing, faint but clear, coming from somewhere in the facility. A woman's voice, singing a lullaby I recognized from my childhood. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. It went on for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped abruptly, leaving only silence behind. I told myself it was just another guard, someone working the night shift, maybe playing music to stay awake. But something about that voice, something about the way it echoed through those concrete walls, felt wrong. The orientation lasted a week. We were 12 new guards. I was the only one from outside the military. The others had backgrounds in the Marines, the Army, Special Forces. There was Marcus Hale, a broad-shouldered former Ranger with a scar that ran from his ear to his jaw, the kind of guy who looked like he'd seen combat and survived. He barely spoke, but when he did, everyone listened. Then there was Ethan Cole, a quiet guy from Massachusetts who'd done 2 tours in the Middle East and never talked about what he'd seen there. He had this nervous habit of checking his surroundings constantly, like he expected an attack at any moment. Sometimes, I'd catch him staring at the walls, at the corners of rooms, like he was searching for something hidden. Our supervising officer was a woman named Lila Monroe, mid-40s, steel gray eyes, and a demeanor that suggested she'd seen things that would break most people. She ran the orientation with military precision, teaching us the patrol routes, the communication protocols, the emergency procedures. But there was something she didn't teach us, something she deliberately avoided: the restricted zones. On a massive map of the facility, certain sections were marked with red hatching. Sector 7, Sublevel 4, the deep labs, and one area, right in the center of the complex, that had no label at all, just a red circle with the words, and no entry. Level 10 clearance only. Before we continue, I just want to remind you, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me bring you more content like this, and trust me, this story is about to get much darker. Lila pointed at these zones with a laser pointer, her expression grave. You will never, under any circumstances, enter these areas, she told us on our last day of training. Her eyes swept across each of us, lingering a moment too long on Marcus, then on Ethan, then on me. If you see someone attempting to breach these zones, you report it immediately. You do not investigate. You do not engage. You report and withdraw. Is that understood? We all nodded, but I saw the question in everyone's eyes. What's in there? Marcus raised his hand, his deep voice cutting through the silence. What if there's an emergency? What if someone's injured in one of those zones? Lila's expression didn't change. You report it, and you wait for specialized teams to respond. Under no circumstances do you enter those zones, even to save a life. The danger is too great. What kind of danger? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lila was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her weighing her words carefully. The kind that doesn't discriminate, the kind that gets inside your head and doesn't let go. She turned off the projector, and the room went dark except for the emergency lighting along the walls. Some of you won't last here. Some of you will request transfers within the first month, and we'll grant them, no questions asked. For those who stay, remember this: curiosity is not your friend in this place. Routine, protocol, obedience, these things will keep you alive. Everything else, everyone else, is a liability. My shift started the following Monday. 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 7 days a week. The pay was incredible, but the isolation was suffocating. We weren't allowed to leave the facility, not for months, and communication with the outside world was limited to one supervised phone call per week, 10 minutes, monitored and recorded. I called my sister Avery on my first week, tried to sound upbeat, told her the job was boring, but the money was good. She asked me where I was, what I was doing, and I gave her the cover story they provided. A security contract at a data center. Nothing exciting. I could hear the worry in her voice, though. Could tell she knew I was hiding something. Just be careful, Trevor, she said before we hung up. Whatever you're doing, wherever you are, just promise me you'll be careful. I promised, not knowing how hollow that promise would become. The work itself was monotonous. I was assigned to Corridor B, a long hallway in the western section of the facility that connected the administrative offices to the research wings. My job was simple: check IDs, monitor the security feeds, walk the corridor every 30 minutes, report anything unusual. For the first 2 weeks, nothing happened. Scientists in lab coats would pass by, nod politely, swipe their badges. Administrative staff would hurry past with folders and tablets. Sometimes, late at night, I'd see cleaning crews pushing their carts, emptying trash bins, mopping floors. It was boring, mind-numbingly so, and I started to wonder if the stories about Area 51 were just elaborate myths, government propaganda, to keep people interested in a place that was really just a boring research facility. But I noticed things, small things that didn't quite add up, like how some of the scientists would return from their shifts looking different. Not physically different, but changed somehow. Their eyes would be distant and unfocused, and they'd walk past me without acknowledging my presence, even the ones who usually said hello. One scientist, Dr. Patricia Chun, had been friendly to me from day one. She'd always stop to chat, ask me how I was adjusting, share a joke or two. But one night, about 2 weeks into my assignment, she walked past me without even looking up. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, and she was muttering something under her breath, over and over. It knows, it knows, it knows. I called out to her, "Dr. Chun, are you all right?" She stopped, turned to face me, and for a moment, just a moment, her eyes focused on mine, and what I saw there terrified me. Pure, unadulterated fear, the kind that comes from seeing something your mind can't process. "Don't go down there, Trevor," she whispered. "No matter what you hear, no matter what they tell you, don't go down to the deep levels." Then she turned and hurried away, leaving me standing there, confused and disturbed. I mentioned it to Marcus the next day during our shift overlap. He was leaning against the wall, drinking coffee from a thermos, looking as tired as I felt. "Dr. Chun said something weird to me last night." I told him. Told me not to go down to the deep levels. Looked scared out of her mind. Marcus's expression darkened. "She's not the first. I've seen at least 3 other researchers come up from below, looking like they'd seen ghosts. Whatever they're doing down there, it's messing with people." "Have you heard anything?" I asked. "Any rumors about what's in those restricted zones?" He was quiet for a moment, then leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Ethan told me something he overheard in the mess hall. 2 scientists talking when they thought no one was listening. They mentioned entities, something about containment failures, something about how they're getting smarter." "Entities," I repeated. "What does that mean?" Marcus shrugged. "Could be anything, biological weapons, experimental subjects, hell. Could be aliens for all we know. But whatever it is, it's got everyone on edge. You see how many armed guards patrol the lower-level access points? You see how they're all carrying live ammunition. This isn't standard security protocol. This is containment." That conversation stuck with me, played over and over in my mind during my shifts. I started paying more attention to the facility, to the rhythms and patterns. I noticed how certain elevators were off limits, how certain stairwells were sealed with doors that required biometric authentication. I noticed how late at night, when the facility was supposed to be quiet, I could sometimes feel vibrations through the floor, like heavy machinery operating deep below. And I noticed the cameras. They were everywhere, but they weren't just monitoring us. Some of them were pointed at walls, at empty corners, at places where no one ever walked. It was like they were watching for something that might appear where it shouldn't. Then, on the night of September 23rd, everything changed. It was 2:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because I just checked my watch. One of the facility-issued ones that only told time. No smart features. No GPS. I was doing my patrol, walking slowly down Corridor B, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant whoosh of the ventilation system, when I heard it. A sound faint, but distinctly out of place. A scraping noise, like metal on concrete, coming from somewhere ahead of me. I stopped, hand moving instinctively to the radio on my belt. The corridor ahead was empty, the lights flickering slightly near the far end. I waited, listening. The sound came again, louder this time. Definitely metal, dragging, scraping, and underneath it, something else, a wet, organic sound like breathing. I unclipped my flashlight and moved forward slowly, keeping my back to the wall. The facility suddenly felt different, oppressive, like the air pressure had changed. My ears were ringing slightly, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached the end of the corridor, I realized the sound was coming from behind a maintenance door, a small gray door marked electrical, authorized personnel only. I'd passed this door dozens of times during my patrols, never given it a second thought. It was always locked, always sealed. But now it was slightly ajar. The gap was small, maybe an inch, but enough to see darkness beyond, and enough for that scraping sound to escape. I should have called it in right then. Should have radioed Lila. Should have followed every protocol they drilled into us during orientation. But curiosity, that dangerous, foolish curiosity, made me reach for the door handle. My hand was shaking as I pushed it open, the hinges creaking softly in the silence. The room beyond was dark, my flashlight beam cutting through thick shadows. It was a small space, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, filled with electrical panels and junction boxes. Everything looked normal, standard maintenance room, nothing out of the ordinary. But there, in the back corner, partially hidden behind a large electrical panel, was something that shouldn't have been there. Another door. This one was different, older, made of heavy steel with rivets along its frame, and no handle, no keypad, no visible way to open it. It looked like it had been sealed shut, welded, covered with layers of paint and rust. But the seal had been broken recently. I could see fresh scrape marks around the edges where something, or someone, had pried it open, and there were scratches, deep gouges in the metal, like something with claws had been trying to get through. The scraping sound came again, from beyond that door, echoing up from somewhere deep below, and this time I could hear something else mixed with it. Whispering, dozens of voices, all talking at once, too quiet to make out the words, but loud enough to know they were there. I stood there frozen, every instinct screaming at me to back away, to call Lila, to follow protocol. But that door, that impossible door that wasn't on any map or blueprint I'd seen during orientation, called to me. It was like it wanted me to open it, like it had been waiting for me specifically. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. Brooks' status report. It was Lila's voice, cold and professional. I grabbed the radio, my voice coming out shakier than I wanted. All clear on Corridor B. Just checking a maintenance room. There was a pause, longer than usual. What maintenance room, Brooks? The electrical room, near junction point B7. Another pause, and I could hear muffled voices in the background, urgent, alarmed. Exit that room immediately, Brooks. Do not proceed further. Do you understand? But I was already reaching for the door, my hand touching that cold steel, feeling the vibrations running through it, vibrations that felt almost alive. Brooks, acknowledge. I pressed my palm against the door and pushed. It swung open silently, revealing a narrow staircase descending into absolute darkness. The air that rushed out was cold, unnaturally so, and carried a smell I couldn't quite place. Something chemical, something organic, something that made my stomach turn. It smelled like formaldehyde mixed with decay, with something else underneath that I couldn't identify, something that didn't smell like it belonged on Earth. My radio crackled again, Lila's voice sharp with panic. Brooks, step away from that door. That is a direct order. But I couldn't. I was already stepping through, already beginning my descent, drawn by something I couldn't explain, couldn't resist. It was like the door had been calling to me, like it had been waiting. And now that I'd found it, I had no choice but to see what was below. The door swung shut behind me, cutting off Lila's voice, plunging me into darkness broken only by my flashlight beam. The temperature dropped immediately, my breath forming clouds, and I could hear my footsteps echoing in a confined space, echoing and being answered by other footsteps, coming from far below, matching my rhythm exactly. I stopped, the echo stopped. I took another step, heard it repeated from the darkness below. Something was down there. Something was listening, matching my movements. The staircase spiraled down and down and down. 50 steps, 100, 200. My legs began to ache, and a voice in my head kept screaming at me to turn back, but I couldn't. Something was pulling me forward, some terrible curiosity that overrode every rational thought. It was like being in a dream, watching myself do something stupid, unable to stop. The walls changed as I descended. At first they were concrete, smooth and modern, but gradually they became rougher, older, stone mixed with concrete, and I could see marks on them, scratches, symbols carved deep into the surface. Some of them looked ancient, withered by time, while others were fresh, still showing the white inner stone where they'd been recently carved. I stopped at one of these symbols, ran my finger along it. It was warm, impossibly warm, and seemed to pulse under my touch like it had a heartbeat. The symbol was complex, 3 circles overlapping in a triangular pattern, with lines radiating outward like a sun, or like something bursting open. Further down, I started seeing words mixed with the symbols. Different languages, some I recognized. German, Russian, English, others I'd never seen before. The English words were fragmented warnings. Turn back. They see you. Don't let them speak. IT learns. We were wrong. Finally, after what felt like forever, the stairs ended at another door, this one marked with faded yellow paint, and that same symbol, 3 overlapping circles. The door was unlocked, standing open just a crack, and through that crack I could see red emergency lighting beyond. I pushed it open and stepped into a corridor that shouldn't exist. It stretched ahead into darkness, wider than the stairwell, with doors lining both sides. Emergency lighting, dim and red, cast everything in a hellish glow. The walls were covered in warnings, in multiple languages. Danger. Authorized personnel only. Biohazard. Extreme caution, and beneath those official warnings, more scratched messages, more desperate pleas. Count them. Always count them. If it knows your name. Run. 7 of 17 are empty. They're not human anymore. The air down here was different, thick, hard to breathe, and carried that same awful smell, but stronger now, mixed with something electrical, like ozone after a lightning strike. My flashlight flickered, and I hit it against my palm, making it steady again. But when the light came back, I saw something that made me freeze. Footprints. Fresh footprints in the dust on the floor, leading from the stairwell, leading down the corridor, my footprints. But there were other prints too, going the other direction, coming from deep in the corridor, heading toward the stairs. Bare feet, human-shaped, but the toes were too long, the stride was too wide, and they were recent, still clearly defined in the dust. Something had come up these stairs recently. Something had gone through that maintenance door into the facility above. If you're still watching, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because what I'm about to tell you, what I saw in those cells, it's going to haunt you, just like it haunts me every single night. I followed the corridor, past door after door, each one identical, heavy steel with a small window, reinforced glass, thick enough to stop a bullet. I approached the first one slowly, shining my light through the glass, and looked inside. The room beyond was a cell, sterile white walls, a steel bed bolted to the floor, toilet in the corner, sink. But what made my blood run cold was the scratching on the walls, hundreds, thousands of marks, carved deep into the concrete, covering every surface from floor to ceiling. There were symbols, words, and languages I didn't understand, and drawings, crude but detailed drawings. Drawings of human figures, but wrong, distorted, with too many limbs, too many joints, too many eyes. Drawings of faces, dozens of faces, all different, all perfectly detailed, like someone had been practicing, learning, memorizing. The cell was empty, but the scratches were fresh. I could see dust still falling from some of them. Could see where something had been scraping at the walls just hours, maybe minutes, before I arrived. I backed away, heart pounding, and looked down the corridor. There were dozens of doors, dozens of cells, all with small windows. I moved to the next one, looked inside, and saw the same thing, scratches, symbols, drawings. This cell had words scratched into the walls, in English, repeated over and over. Help me. I'm still me. Don't believe what you see. It's wearing my face. Kill me, please kill me, kill me, kill me. But it was the message scratched into the door, right at eye level, that made me step back. Fresh scratches, deep gouges, spelling out words that seemed meant for me. IT wears our faces. I stumbled backward, my flashlight beam shaking, illuminating the corridor, and that's when I noticed something else. The doors, they weren't all closed. Some were open, just slightly, enough to see darkness beyond, enough for something to slip through. I started counting, door by door, checking which ones were sealed and which ones were ajar. 1, 2, 3 open doors. 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 cells with their doors standing open. 7 empty spaces where something had been contained. And that's when I heard it. A voice coming from somewhere deeper in the corridor, singing, soft and melodic. A children's lullaby that I recognized from my own childhood, from my mother's voice, from long nights when I was sick and she'd sit beside my bed. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. The voice was perfect, too perfect, like it had been recorded and was being played back through speakers. But there were no speakers, no technology visible anywhere in this ancient corridor. Just stone and steel and shadows. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird. I should have run. I should have sprinted back up those stairs and never looked back. But that voice, it was familiar, impossibly familiar. It sounded exactly like my mother who had died when I was 12 years old, my mother who I'd never hear sing again. Except now I was hearing her voice, perfect and clear, coming from the darkness ahead. And if that mockingbird don't sing, I walked toward the voice, drawn like a moth to flame, past cell after cell, each one covered in those terrible scratches and warnings. Some had messages that stopped mid-sentence, like whoever was writing them had been interrupted, or had given up, or had realized the futility of warning others. Papa's gonna buy you a diamond ring. The voice grew louder, clearer, and I realized it was coming from the very last door at the end of the corridor. This door was different from the others, larger, reinforced with additional steel plates, and marked with more warnings, more symbols. But it was standing open, just a crack, just enough to see red light beyond. And if that diamond ring turns brass. I reached the door, my hand shaking as I pushed it wider, and looked inside. The cell was not empty. Something sat on the bed, humanoid in shape, but wrong in every detail that mattered. Its skin was too pale, almost translucent, and I could see dark veins pulsing beneath the surface, spreading like cracks through porcelain. Its limbs were too long, jointed in places they shouldn't be, and when it moved, those joints bent at angles that made my stomach turn. But worst of all, its face. Its face was my mother's face, perfect down to the last detail. The mole on her left cheek, the scar on her forehead from a childhood accident when she fell off her bike. Even the way she smiled, that gentle, loving smile I remembered from 1,000 bedtimes. It looked at me, with eyes that were my mother's eyes, same color, same shape, but empty, void of anything human, like looking through windows into an abandoned house. And it finished the song in my mother's voice, perfect pitch, perfect inflection. Papa's gonna buy you a looking glass. Then it smiled wider, too wide, its mouth opening further than any human mouth should, revealing rows of needle-like teeth, translucent, sharp, glistening in the red light. And it spoke in my mother's voice, but the words didn't match the movement of its mouth, like it was projecting sound rather than speaking. Hello, Trevor. I've been waiting for you. I've been practicing, learning your voice, your memories. Would you like to hear me be your mother? I'm very good at it now. I stood frozen, my mind trying to process what I was seeing, trying to reconcile the face I loved with the horror wearing it. The thing tilted its head, studying me, and when it moved, its neck bent at an impossible angle, rotating almost completely around. You're scared. I can smell it, taste it in the air. Fear has such an interesting flavor, Trevor, different from person to person. Yours tastes like regret, like unfinished business. You never said goodbye to her, did you? When she died, you weren't there. It was right. I wasn't there when my mother died. I was at school, got called to the principal's office, got told she'd had a heart attack, was gone before the ambulance arrived. I never got to say goodbye, never got to tell her I loved her one last time. I could be her Trevor. I could give you that moment. All you have to do is come closer. Let me hold you. Let me sing to you one more time. It stood up, and I saw that it was wearing something that looked like a hospital gown, stained and torn, and its feet were human-shaped, but the toes were too long, the nails thick and yellowed like claws. It took a step toward me, and that's when I noticed something else. There were others in the cell, in the shadows. I hadn't seen them before, but now my flashlight caught them. 5 more figures, sitting against the walls, all with translucent skin, all with that same pale, wrong appearance. And they were all watching me, all wearing faces I knew. One had Marcus's face, perfect down to the scar on his jaw. One had Ethan's face, had his nervous expression, his haunted eyes. One had my sister Avery's face, and seeing it there, seeing that thing wearing my sister's features, broke something in me. We've been watching you, Trevor, watching you all, learning you, becoming you. Soon we'll be ready, soon we'll be perfect, and then, the thing with my mother's face smiled again, and behind it, the others smiled too, all in perfect synchronization. Then we'll leave this place, and no one will know the difference. That's when I ran. I don't remember much about the climb back up those stairs, just blind panic, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. I could hear them behind me, all of them following, their footsteps perfectly matching mine, like they were learning, practicing. And they were singing, all of them, in voices of people I knew, people I loved. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. I burst through the maintenance door, stumbled into corridor B, and immediately set off every alarm in the facility. Klaxons blared, red lights flashed, and I could hear boots pounding down hallways, converging on my position. Within seconds, armed guards surrounded me, weapons drawn, shouting commands I couldn't process through my panic. I was thrown to the ground, hands zip-tied behind my back, and dragged across the floor. Through it all, I kept screaming, babbling about the stairs, the cells, the things wearing familiar faces. They're coming up, they're getting out, they have our faces, they have our faces. Someone jabbed something into my neck, a needle, and the world started to blur, to fade. The last thing I remember before unconsciousness took me was seeing Lila standing over me, her expression unreadable, and hearing her say, "Contain it, find out how many are loose, and God help us, activate Protocol 7. When I woke up, I was in a detention cell. Not like the cells I'd seen in the deep levels. This one was clean modern, with a camera in the corner and bright fluorescent lighting. I was lying on a cot, still in my uniform, with an 4 in my arm feeding me something clear. The first day passed in a haze. Guard would come, silent men in black uniforms, to bring food and water, but they wouldn't speak to me, wouldn't acknowledge my questions. I tried to piece together what had happened, tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination, some kind of gas leak in that maintenance room that made me see things. But I knew, deep down, that what I'd seen was real. On second day, they removed the 4 and let me use the bathroom. I saw myself in the mirror for the first time since that night, and barely recognized my reflection. I looked like I'd aged years and hours, gray patches in my hair that hadn't been there before, lines around my eyes, and something else, something I couldn't quite place, but that made me look different. I stared at my reflection for a long time, studying every detail, trying to find some reassurance that I was still me, still Trevor Brooks. But the longer I looked, the more uncertain I became. How would I know if one of those things had taken my place? How would anyone know? The third day, I started to break down. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could only pace back and forth in that cell, counting my steps, trying to hold on to my sense of self. I kept hearing that song, that lullaby, echoing in my head, and sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I could see them, those translucent faces, watching me, waiting. Late on the third night, or maybe it was early on the 4th day. Time had become meaningless. I heard footsteps approaching my cell. The door opened and Lila entered, alone this time, carrying a folder and 2 cups of coffee. She looked tired, older somehow, like the weight of whatever was happening was crushing her. She sat down at the small table in my cell, slid one coffee cup toward me, and opened the folder. "You weren't supposed to find that place, Trevor," she said quietly, her voice hoarse. "That door should have been sealed, should have been impossible to open. But something has been weakening the containment protocols, sabotaging our security measures." I picked up the coffee with shaking hands, felt the warmth, let it ground me. What were those things? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her own coffee cup like it held answers. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "We don't know, not really. The facility, the deep levels, they were here before Area 51, before the military took over this land in 1955. We found documents, old documents from the 1920s, mentions of a private organization called the Vesper Collective. They were conducting experiments here, trying to open doorways to somewhere else." "Somewhere else," I repeated. She nodded slowly. "They believed there were other dimensions, other planes of existence running parallel to our own, and they found a way to create tiers, small rifts between worlds. They brought things through, brought them into our reality, tried to study them, tried to understand them." She opened the folder, showed me photographs, old black and white images, grainy and damaged by time, showing the same corridor I'd walked, the same cells, but with people in them, people in lab coats, scientists from decades past, standing beside the cells, observing the things inside. And in those cells, I could see them, the same translucent figures, wearing human faces, learning, adapting. The collective lost control in 1943. Lila continued, her finger tracing one of the photographs. Whatever they'd brought through, it was more intelligent than they'd anticipated, more adaptive. It learned from its captors, learned to mimic them, learned to wear their faces like masks. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. Half the staff had been replaced, killed, and copied, and the facility had to be purged. I felt sick, my coffee forgotten. Purged, burned. Everyone inside, human or otherwise. The military moved and sealed the deep levels, built a modern facility on top, and established protocols to ensure it never happened again. For 70 years, we've maintained containment, studied them from a distance, tried to understand what they are and how to eliminate them permanently. But something went wrong, I said, seeing it in her eyes. She closed the folder, her hands trembling slightly. 6 months ago, we noticed changes, small things at first. Containment doors opening on their own. Security footage showing static at crucial moments. Personnel reporting strange dreams, feeling watched. Then 3 weeks ago, Dr. Patricia Chun went down to sub-level 4 for a routine inspection, and when she came back, she wasn't the same. "The things got to her," I whispered. Lila shook her head, her expression grave. "Worse than that, Trevor. They got into her mind, showed her things, promised her things. She started sabotaging the containment protocols, opening doors, weakening seals. We caught her eventually, found her in the deep levels, trying to release more of them. When we detained her, when we questioned her, she told us they'd been speaking to her for months, whispering through the walls, learning about the facility, learning about us." "Where is she now?" "Dead. She took her own life in detention, but before she died, she told us something that's kept me awake every night since. She said they don't need to escape anymore. They've already won. They've been studying us long enough, learning our patterns, our behaviors, our relationships. Some of them, the ones that escaped before we could contain them, they're already out there, already wearing faces, already living lives that aren't theirs." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "How many got out?" "We don't know. 7 cells were open when we found you. But security footage from the past 6 months shows at least 15 separate containment breaches that were never reported, never logged. Dr. Chun had been covering them up, making it look like the cells were still occupied when they were empty." I thought about the footprints I'd seen, the bare feet heading up the stairs, heading into the facility. They could be anywhere, anyone. That's why we can't let you leave, Trevor. That's why everyone who's been in this facility for the past 6 months is under quarantine protocols. We're testing everyone, psychological evaluations, physical examinations, trying to find ways to tell the real people from the copies. And if you can't tell the difference? She met my eyes, and I saw the terrible answer there before she spoke. Then we eliminate everyone and start over. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel sweat beating on my forehead despite the cold. Everything I'd seen, everything I'd experienced, it was all part of something larger, something that had been happening for decades, maybe longer. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Lila leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. Because you've seen them, you've looked them in the eyes, and you're still you. Most people who encounter them that directly, they either die, or they get replaced, or they lose their minds. But you ran. You escaped. And that tells me something important. It tells me you might be strong enough to help us. Help you how? We need to go back down there, Trevor. We need to clear those cells, eliminate whatever's left, and seal that corridor permanently. But we can't do it blind. We need someone who's been there, who's seen them, who knows what we're dealing with. I stood up, coffee spilling from my shaking hands. You're insane. I'm not going back down there. I'm not. You don't have a choice, she said, not unkindly. None of us do. If we don't contain this, if we don't stop them now, they'll spread. They'll learn. They'll replace more people, infiltrate more facilities, more cities. Eventually, there won't be any real humans left, just copies, just things wearing our faces. I wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, but I knew she was right. I'd seen what those things could do, how perfect their mimicry was. If they got out, if they spread into the general population, there'd be no way to stop them. When I asked, my voice hollow, tomorrow night, we're assembling a team, 6 operators, all volunteers, all people who've proven they're still human. You'll be the guide. You'll take us down there, show us the cells, and help us eliminate every last one of them. She stood, picked up the folder, and headed for the door. Before she left, she turned back, her expression softening slightly. Get some rest, Trevor. Tomorrow is going to be the longest night of your life, and you'll need every ounce of strength you have. After she left, I lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. Tomorrow, I have to go back down those stairs, back to that corridor, back to face those things wearing familiar faces. The thought terrified me, but Lila was right. There was no choice. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it finally did, I dreamed of translucent figures, of faces I knew, of my mother's voice singing that lullaby over and over, until I woke up screaming. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. They moved me to a different facility, a more secure location deeper in the complex, where the team was gathering. I met them one by one, 6 men and women, who looked as haunted and exhausted as I felt. There was Vincent Ramirez, former explosives expert with burned scars covering half his face, quiet and methodical, the kind of person who calculated every risk before moving. He barely spoke during the briefing, just nodded and checked his equipment with practiced efficiency. Then Grace Hammond, a biologist who'd been studying the entities for 3 years. She had notes, thousands of pages of observations, theories about what they were, where they came from. She explained that they weren't exactly physical beings, not in the way we understood physics. They existed partially in our dimension and partially in something else, something she called the interstitial space. They're like jellyfish, she explained, spreading papers across the table. Mostly translucent, mostly formless, but they can harden their structures, create bones and muscles and skin when they need to interact with our world. The faces they wear, they're not masks. They're reconstructions built from memory, from observation, from consuming the genetic material of their victims. That last part made my stomach turn. Consuming. She nodded grimly. We've found remains in some of the cells, partial remains. It seems they need to absorb their victims in order to copy them perfectly. DNA, memories, personality traits, everything that makes a person unique. They take it all, process it, and rebuild it in their own form. Jackson Pierce was next, head of security operations, a man who'd seen multiple containment breaches and somehow survived each one. He had a nervous energy, constantly checking his weapons, adjusting his gear, like he expected an attack at any moment. I've lost 14 men to those things, he told me, his voice tight. 14 good people who I watched get replaced, who I had to eliminate. Once we figured out they weren't human anymore. So when we go down there, when we find them, I need you to understand something, Trevor. We don't hesitate. We don't give them a chance to speak, to plead, to pretend they're human. We eliminate on sight. No exceptions. The others were similarly hardened. Diana Ortiz, a medic who treated victims of entity attacks, who'd seen what happened when people got too close. Thomas Wright, a psychologist who'd interviewed dozens of personnel who'd encountered the entities, trying to understand their methods, their psychology. And finally Raymond Kelly, a priest, which seemed odd until he explained that some of the older documents from the Vesper Collective referenced religious rituals, protective symbols, things that seemed to affect the entities in ways science couldn't explain. Faith is a weapon, Trevor, he told me, holding up a small silver cross. Maybe the only weapon that works against something that can mimic everything else about us. They can copy our faces, our voices, our memories, but they can't replicate belief. They can't understand why we hold on to hope when everything logical says we shouldn't. Lila gathered us all together in a briefing room, the walls covered with maps and photographs and diagrams of the deep levels. She went through the plan step by step. How we'd enter through the maintenance corridor, how we'd descend the stairs in formation, how we'd clear each cell systematically, eliminate any entities we found, and plant charges to seal the corridor permanently. The operation begins at 0200 hours, she said, her laser pointer marking our route on the map. We have a 4-hour window before the next shift rotation, before anyone else enters that section. If we're not out by 0600, the facility will seal automatically, with or without us inside. Understood. We all nodded, though I could see the fear in everyone's eyes, the same fear I felt churning in my gut. They gave me gear, body armor, a helmet with a mounted camera, radio, and a weapon, a modified shotgun loaded with specialized rounds. Grace explained that standard ammunition didn't always work on the entities. Their bodies could adapt, harden, regenerate. But these rounds, they contained a chemical compound that disrupted the entity's molecular structure, forced them back into their translucent, vulnerable state. Aim for center mass, Jackson instructed, showing me how to hold the weapon properly. 3 rounds minimum. Don't stop until you see them collapse. And even then, put 2 more in the head just to be sure. They're resilient, Trevor. More resilient than anything you've ever faced. We spent the rest of the day training, running drills, practicing formations, learning hand signals for when radio communication failed. Lila pushed us hard, knowing that any mistake down there could be fatal, could result in one of us getting copied, replaced. As night fell, as 0200 hours approached, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Terror still gnawed at my insides, but it was distant now, manageable. I thought about my mother, about my sister Avery, about all the people in the world who had no idea what was lurking beneath this facility, what might already be walking among them wearing stolen faces. We gathered at the entrance to the maintenance corridor at exactly 0200, each of us checking our gear one final time. Lila gave a final briefing, her voice steady despite the gravity of what we were about to do. Remember your training. Watch each other's backs. And if anyone shows signs of compromise, if anyone starts acting strange, you report it immediately. We will not, let even one of those things leave with us. Are we clear? Clear, we responded in unison. She nodded, then looked at me. Trevor, lead the way. I took point, pushing open the maintenance door, feeling that familiar rush of cold air, smelling that awful chemical organic scent. My team followed close behind, weapons ready, lights cutting through the darkness. The electrical panels looked the same as before, untouched, but the hidden door in the back corner stood open, waiting. This is it, I whispered into my radio. The door that shouldn't exist. We descended single file, Vincent behind me, then Grace, Jackson, Diana, Thomas, and Raymond bringing up the rear. Our footsteps echoed in that narrow space, and once again I heard them, answered by other footsteps from below, matching our rhythm, mocking us. The temperature dropped as we descended, our breath forming clouds, and I could feel that same terrible pull, that sense of being watched, being waited for. The scratches on the walls seemed deeper now, more numerous, like the entities had been busy since my last visit, like they'd been preparing. Grace stopped at one of the symbols, the 3 overlapping circles, and ran her gloved hand over it. These markings, they're not random. They're a language, or maybe a warning. The Vesper Collective documented similar symbols in their experiments, claimed they were a way to communicate with the entities, to negotiate with them. Did it work? Vincent asked. No. Everyone who tried ended up dead, or worse. We continued down, past the carved warnings, past the desperate messages from people who'd been here before. Someone new since my last visit, fresh scratches that made my blood run cold. They know you're coming. Counted 7. Now there's 12-inch. They're breeding. That last one made everyone stop. Jackson turned to Grace, his face pale. They can reproduce? She shook her head slowly, but I could see uncertainty in her eyes. The research never indicated, but we don't know everything about them. We've only been able to study captured specimens, controlled conditions. If they've been loose, breeding in the deep levels. She didn't finish the thought, didn't need to. We all understood the implications. We reached the bottom door, the one marked with yellow paint and symbols, and I could see it standing wider open than before, like something had been moving through it frequently. Red emergency lighting spilled out, casting long shadows. Stay tight, Jackson ordered. Cover your sectors. Watch for movement. I pushed through first, stepping into that nightmare corridor, and immediately knew something was different. The air was warmer, humid, and I could hear sounds, wet organic sounds, like breathing, like something alive and massive lurking just beyond sight. The cells, they were different too. More doors stood open now, maybe 20, 30, and the scratches on the walls had multiplied, covered every surface in layers of symbols and warnings and drawings. It looked like dozens of people had been here, all leaving their mark, all trying to warn others. But worst of all, the footprints. The floor was covered in them now, hundreds of tracks, all bare feet, all heading in different directions, some leading deeper into the corridor, some heading back toward the stairs, some stopping at cell doors, some just ending. In the middle of the floor, with no explanation. They're not in the cells anymore, Diana whispered, her voice shaking. Jackson raised his fist, signaling us to stop. We froze, listening, and that's when I heard it. Singing multiple voices, dozens of them, all singing that same lullaby, all in perfect harmony, creating an awful, beautiful sound that echoed through the corridor. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird. The voices were coming from deeper in the corridor, from somewhere beyond the cells, from a section I hadn't reached during my first visit. Lila's map had shown the corridor ending after the last cell, but now I could see that wasn't true. The corridor continued, extended into darkness, and that's where they were, all of them singing. And if that mockingbird don't sing, Papa's gonna buy you a diamond ring. We moved forward, weapons raised, lights sweeping across the empty cells. Each one we passed showed the same evidence, recent occupation, fresh scratches, drawings of faces that looked too real, too detailed. And in one cell, we found something that made everyone stop. A body, or what was left of one. A security guard. I recognized the uniform, recognized the face. It was Mitchell Cross, a guard I'd met during orientation, a friendly guy who'd shown me the ropes during my first week. But he was incomplete. His torso was there, still in his uniform, but his face was gone, peeled away like a mask, revealing translucent muscle and bone beneath. His hands were missing, his eyes were hollow sockets, and his chest cavity was open, ribs spread wide, organs carefully removed and arranged on the floor in a pattern I didn't understand. Grace moved closer, examining the body with clinical detachment, and I could see tears streaming down her face despite her professional demeanor. They're getting better at it, more precise. They used to destroy their victims while copying them. But this is surgical. They're learning to harvest us more efficiently. How long has he been dead? Jackson asked. Hours, maybe less. The blood is still tacky, still red. That meant they'd been active recently, while the facility was running normal operations above. They'd been hunting, learning, preparing. We need to move. Lila's voice crackled through our radios. She was monitoring us from the command center, watching through our helmet cameras. You're running out of time. Whatever's down there, you need to eliminate it and get out. We continued, past more cells, past more evidence of the entity's activities. Some cells had multiple bodies, guards, scientists, maintenance workers, all harvested, all incomplete. It was like walking through an abattoir, a factory where humans were disassembled and studied and copied. The singing grew louder as we approached the end of the mapped corridor, and then we found it, a section that wasn't on any blueprint, any map. The corridor opened into a wider space, a chamber carved from the natural rock, ancient and vast, with dozens of passages leading off in different directions. And in the center of this chamber, gathered in a circle, were the entities. I counted them, tried to, but they kept moving, shifting, making it impossible to get an accurate number. 30, 40, maybe more, all translucent, all wearing faces I recognized from the facility. I saw Mitchell Cross, saw Dr. Patricia Chin, saw the guards and scientists, all perfectly copied, all watching us with empty eyes. And in the center of their circle, standing taller than the others, was the one wearing my mother's face. It smiled when it saw me, that terrible too-wide smile, and raised one hand in greeting. Trevor, you came back, and you brought friends. How wonderful. More faces to learn, more memories to taste. The other entities shifted, forming a tighter circle around the one speaking, and I could see them changing, adapting. Their bodies hardened, became more solid, more human-looking, like they were preparing for something. Jackson didn't wait, didn't hesitate. Open fire. Our weapons erupted, the confined space amplifying every shot into deafening thunder. The specialized rounds hit their marks, tore through translucent flesh, and the entity screamed, a sound that wasn't quite human, wasn't quite animal, something else entirely, something that made our ears bleed and our vision blur. Some fell, collapsed into puddles of viscous fluid that steamed on the stone floor. But others, they adapted, their bodies hardening, changing, growing armor plating that deflected our rounds. And they charged, moving with impossible speed, covering the distance between us in seconds. Vincent threw a grenade, shouted a warning, and we dove for cover as it detonated, sending entity bodies and rock fragments flying. The explosion momentarily drove them back, gave us space to reload, to regroup, fall back to the corridor. Jackson ordered, "We can't fight them all here, too much open space." We retreated, firing as we went, and the entities followed, but slowly now, methodically, like they were hurting us, like they had a plan. The one with my mother's face stood at the back, watching, learning, and I could see it changing, its body shifting, becoming more human, less translucent. They're adapting to our weapons. Grace shouted over the gunfire. We need to use the charges, seal them in. But before we could respond, one of the entities, the one wearing Dr. Chin's face, lunged at Thomas, moved faster than we could track, and wrapped its arms around him. He screamed, tried to pull away, but it held him tight, and we watched in horror as its body began to merge with his, translucent skin flowing over his face, into his mouth, his nose, his eyes. Jackson fired, hit the entity square in the chest, but the round passed through it and hit Thomas too. We heard him gurgle, saw blood, saw the entity separate from him and retreat, leaving Thomas on the floor, gasping, bleeding from his mouth. Diana rushed to him, started first aid, but I could see it in her eyes, could see she knew it was too late. Thomas looked up at us, his face pale, his lips forming words we couldn't hear. Then his eyes changed, became distant, empty, and his face went slack. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Thomas sat up, moved with a fluidity that wasn't natural, and smiled at us with Thomas' mouth, but something else behind his eyes. "Thank you," it said in Thomas' voice. "I've always wanted to try this body. It has such interesting memories, such delicious fears." Raymond stepped forward, holding his cross, speaking words in Latin, some kind of prayer or exorcism. The thing wearing Thomas' face flinched, actually recoiled, and the other entities backed away, creating distance. "Fascinating," it said, still in Thomas' voice. "That symbol, those words, they create a resonance we find uncomfortable, but not unbearable. Not anymore. We've been studying your rituals, your faith, learning to overcome it. Just like we've learned to overcome your weapons, your security, your resistance. Fall back. Lila's voice screamed through our radios. Get out of there now. I'm sealing the corridor in 60 seconds. We ran, weapons forgotten. Just pure survival instinct driving us back toward the stairs. Behind us, the entities followed, no longer singing, just making that terrible screaming sound, that alien chorus that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Vincent stayed at the rear, dropping charges as he went, setting timed explosives at key points. Go, he shouted. I'll slow them down. We didn't argue, couldn't argue. Just kept running as the corridor shook with explosions, as ceiling rock began to fall, as the entire structure threatened to collapse. I could hear the entities behind us, could hear them adapting their bodies, growing claws for climbing, growing extra limbs for speed, evolving in real time to chase us. Grace stumbled, fell, and one of the entities was on her instantly, its body wrapping around her legs, pulling her back. Jackson turned, fired, but more entities surged forward, a wave of translucent horror. Raymond grabbed Grace, pulled her free, and I saw him thrust his cross into the entity's face. It shrieked, released her, and we pulled her up, kept moving. The stairs were ahead, salvation was close, but the entities were faster now, had learned how to move in this environment, had adapted completely. I could feel one behind me, could sense its hand reaching for my shoulder. Then Vincent's final charge detonated, and the world became fire and thunder and falling rock. The blast waved through us forward, up the stairs, and I felt the heat, felt the concussive force, felt something grab my ankle and then release as the explosion consumed it. We burst through the maintenance door, into the sterile corridor, and Lila was there with a team of guards, sealing the entrance, welding the door shut with plasma torches. I could hear the entities on the other side, pounding, screaming, trying to break through. But the metal held, the seals held, and gradually the sounds faded, became distant, then silent. We lay on the floor, gasping, bleeding, trying to process what we just survived. I counted heads, saw Grace, Jackson, Diana, Raymond, Lila, but Vincent and Thomas were gone, left behind in that hell. Did we get them all? Diana asked, her voice hollow. Nobody answered, because we all knew the truth. 7 entities had escaped before tonight, maybe more, and they were out there somewhere, wearing faces, living lives, waiting. The next week was a nightmare of debriefings, medical examinations, psychological evaluations. They kept us in isolation, monitored us constantly, looking for any sign that we'd been compromised, that we'd been copied. The tests were invasive, brutal, pushing us to our breaking points to see if we'd crack, if we'd reveal ourselves as imposters. I passed everything, all the tests, all the evaluations, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that something had changed in me during that mission, during my time in the deep levels. Grace killed herself 3 days after we got out, hanged herself in her quarters, using torn bed sheets. Her note was brief, just 3 words. I remember everything. Nobody understood what she meant, but I did. She'd been taken, even if only for a moment, and she'd seen what they saw, known what they knew, experienced their perspective, and it had broken her, shown her something humans weren't meant to know. Jackson lasted 2 weeks before he started showing signs. He'd be fine one moment, normal, himself. Then he'd go blank, his eyes would become distant, and he'd say things that didn't make sense. There in my head, he'd whisper. They left something behind, and it's growing, spreading, learning. They took him away. I don't know where. Lila told me he was receiving treatment, but I could see the lie in her eyes. Diana transferred out, requested a post as far from Area 51 as possible. Last I heard, she was working security at some satellite facility in Alaska, refusing to talk about what happened, refusing to acknowledge that any of it was real. Raymond stayed, said he had a duty, said God had placed him here for a purpose. He spent his days in the facility chapel, praying, studying ancient texts, looking for better ways to combat the entities. Sometimes I'd visit him, and he'd tell me about his research, about symbols and rituals that predated Christianity, predated written language, ancient knowledge about things that existed between worlds. They've always been here, Trevor, he told me one night. his voice heavy with exhaustion. The entities, they're not invaders, not alien. They're native to the spaces between, the gaps in reality where our dimension frays. We created doors to their realm, and they walked through. But they were always there, always waiting, always watching. As for me, they kept me at the facility. Lila said it was because I was valuable, because I'd survived multiple encounters and could help train others. But I knew the real reason. They were watching me, waiting to see if I'd been compromised, if I was still fully human. And honestly, I didn't know anymore. I started having dreams, vivid dreams where I was in those cells, where I was one of them, translucent and changing, learning faces, tasting memories. I'd wake up screaming, find scratch marks on my walls, symbols I didn't remember carving, drawings of faces that looked too perfect. I started avoiding mirrors, because sometimes, just sometimes, when I looked at my reflection, I'd see something translucent beneath my skin, something moving, adapting, waiting to emerge. 6 months after the mission, Lila called me to her office. She looked older, grayer, like the weight of maintaining containment was crushing her slowly. "I need to tell you something, Trevor," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "Something we discovered during the post-mission analysis." I opened it, saw photographs, surveillance footage, and felt my blood turn to ice. The photos showed my face, but they were taken in places I'd never been, times I couldn't account for. There was a photo of me in the mess hall at 0300 hours on a night I'd been sleeping in my quarters. Another showed me entering restricted zones I'd never accessed. And another showed me standing in that maintenance corridor, staring at the sealed door, my face expressionless, my eyes empty. "We've been monitoring you," Lila admitted. "Ever since you came back, watching for signs. And Trevor, we found them. There are gaps in your timeline, hours where you can't account for your whereabouts, where security footage shows you in 2 places at once." I wanted to argue, wanted to deny it, but I couldn't, because deep down, I'd known something was wrong, known that pieces of time were missing, that I was losing moments, hours, days. "What does it mean?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She met my eyes, and I saw pity there, and fear. "It means you were copied, Trevor. Maybe not completely, maybe not perfectly, but something happened down there, something that left a piece of them inside you, or created a piece of you inside them. We're not sure which." "So what happens now?" She was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out another document. "We keep monitoring, keep testing, and if you start to change, if you start to become something else, we'll have to make a difficult decision." I understood. They'd eliminate me, just like they'd eliminated Mitchell Cross, just like they'd eliminated Dr. Patricia Chun and countless others who'd been compromised. "How long do I have?" "We don't know. Some people change in days, others in months, and some never fully convert. They exist in between, part human, part entity, aware of both states, but never fully one or the other." She slid a phone across the desk, an old flip phone, no smart features. "Keep this with you. If you feel yourself changing, if you start to lose control, call this number. We'll come for you. Make it quick, painless. You deserve that much after everything you've done." I took the phone, felt its weight in my hand, felt the weight of what it represented. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've been living in a strange limbo, still working at the facility, still doing my patrols, but knowing that any moment could be my last, that any moment I might look in a mirror and see something else staring back. The dreams have gotten worse, more vivid, more real. Sometimes I wake up and find myself standing in places I don't remember going, doing things I don't remember starting. I've started losing more time, bigger gaps, whole days sometimes. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is that I'm starting to understand them, the entities. When I close my eyes, I can almost see through their perspective, almost understand their hunger, their need to learn, to become, to replace. They're not evil, not in any way we'd understand. They're just different. They exist in a state we can't comprehend, and when they copy us, when they wear our faces, they're not trying to harm us. They're trying to understand us, trying to become something more than what they are. But understanding them doesn't make them less dangerous. doesn't change what needs to be done. 3 days ago, I found something in my quarters that confirmed my worst fears. A drawing, detailed and perfect, showing my sister Avery's face. I'd drawn it while I was asleep, while something else was controlling my hand, and it was too perfect, too accurate, like I'd been studying her, memorizing her, preparing to copy her. That's when I knew that I was changing, knew that whatever those entities had left inside me was growing, spreading, learning to control me. I should call that number, should end this before I become something else, something that might hurt the people I love. But I can't, not yet, because there's still something I need to do, something I need to tell the world before I'm gone. If you're watching this, if you're listening to my story, then you need to understand something crucial. The entities I encountered, they're not unique to Area 51. They're not contained to that one facility. The Vesper Collective created doorways all over the world, dozens of sites, maybe hundreds, and we don't know which ones were successfully sealed and which ones are still open, still leaking entities into our reality. That person you know who changed suddenly, who came back from somewhere different, who doesn't quite act like themselves anymore. Maybe they're going through something personal. Maybe they're dealing with trauma or stress. Or maybe, just maybe, they're not who you think they are anymore. There's no way to know for sure, no test that's completely reliable, no method that can definitively separate the real from the copy. All you can do is watch, pay attention, notice the little things that don't quite add up. And if you find one, if you discover that someone you love has been replaced, I don't know what to tell you, because killing them won't bring back the person you lost. The real them is already gone, harvested and consumed and copied. All you can do is mourn and move on, and try not to let the knowledge destroy you. As for me, I can feel it now, feel myself slipping, feel the boundaries between me and them blurring. Sometimes I can't remember if a memory is mine or if it's something I absorbed from one of them, something they showed me during those moments we were connected. I look at my hands, and sometimes they seem translucent. Sometimes I can see through my own skin to the bones beneath. I look in mirrors, and sometimes my reflection doesn't match my movements, doesn't smile when I smile, doesn't blink when I blink. I don't have much time left. Soon, I'll be gone, replaced by something that looks like me, sounds like me, but isn't me. And whatever that thing is, it'll walk out of this facility. It'll call my sister. It'll live my life. And no one will know the difference. Except maybe you. Because you've heard this story. You know what to look for. You know the signs. So I'm asking you. I'm begging you. If you ever meet someone who claims to be Trevor Brooks, someone who tells you they used to work at Area 51, someone who knows details about this story that only I should know, don't trust them. Don't believe them. And whatever you do, don't let them get close to the people you love. Because it won't be me. It'll be something else, something that learned my face so well it can fool everyone, including itself. I'm recording this now, while I'm still mostly me, while I still have enough humanity left to warn you. By the time you see this, by the time this message reaches the world, I'll probably be gone, converted completely, indistinguishable from the thing I've become. But know this, somewhere in the depths of Area 51, in corridors that don't exist on any map, in cells that were never officially built, those entities are still there, still waiting, still learning. And despite everything we've done, despite all our containment protocols and security measures and desperate attempts to eliminate them, they're winning. They're patient, more patient than any human could ever be. They can wait decades, centuries, learning from every encounter, adapting to every countermeasure. And with each person they copy, each face they steal, they get better at being us, better at hiding among us. Lila told me something else during our last meeting, something she wasn't supposed to share. The 7 entities that escaped before we sealed the corridor, the facility tracked 4 of them, tracked them leaving Nevada, tracked them spreading to different cities, Chicago, Denver, Seattle, Los Angeles. But then the tracking stopped. The entities disappeared into the general population, became untraceable, indistinguishable from regular people. And in the months since, there have been reports, unusual reports, from all 4 cities. People changing suddenly, entire families going silent, neighborhoods where everyone seems just slightly off, just slightly wrong. The government knows. The military knows. But what can they do? They can't quarantine entire cities. Can't start testing millions of people for something they barely understand. So they watch, they monitor, they track unusual patterns and hope they can contain the spread before it's too late. But I don't think they can. I don't think anyone can. Because the entities aren't just copying us anymore. They're improving on us. They're taking our best qualities, our intelligence, our adaptability, our creativity, and combining them with their own abilities, their capacity to change, to regenerate, to exist between dimensions. They're becoming something new, something that's neither human nor entity, but something in between, something better than both. And eventually, maybe in years, maybe in decades, they'll outnumber us. The real humans will become the minority, and we won't even know it happened. I've seen glimpses of their world, the place they come from, that interstitial space Grace talked about. It's not evil, it's not malicious, it's just different. A dimension where physical form is fluid, where identity is changeable, where the concept of self doesn't exist the way we understand it. They don't hate us. They envy us. They envy our solidity, our permanence, our ability to be one thing consistently. So they copy us, trying to understand what it means to be fixed, to be singular, to be human. But in copying us, they destroy us. They can't help it. It's their nature, like a virus that kills its host while trying to reproduce. They don't understand death the way we do. Don't understand that when they harvest someone, when they consume their memories and DNA and personality, they're ending something precious, something irreplaceable. Or maybe they do understand, and they just don't care. I've started forgetting things, important things. My sister's birthday, my mother's favorite song, the name of my childhood dog. The memories are still there. I can feel them, but they're fading, being replaced by other memories, memories that aren't mine. I remember being in that cell, remember scratching symbols on the walls, remember the feeling of my body shifting, changing, learning to become solid. I remember watching guards walk past, studying their faces, their movements, their patterns. I remember the hunger, the need to become, to replace, to evolve. But those are my memories. They're theirs, bleeding through, taking over. Sometimes I catch myself doing things I don't remember deciding to do. I'll be walking through the facility and suddenly realize I'm in a section I don't have clearance for, standing in front of sealed doors, staring at them like I'm waiting for something. Or I'll be in my quarters and find myself drawing, always drawing, faces of people I work with, faces of people I've never met, faces that might not even exist yet. Raymond visited me yesterday, brought me communion, said prayers over me. He could see it, could see that I'm changing. His hand shook when he held the cross up to my forehead, and I saw fear in his eyes, but also pity. "It's not your fault, Trevor," he told me, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't ask for this, didn't choose it. But you have to understand what you're becoming. It's not compatible with human existence. If you let it complete, if you let the transformation finish, you'll be a threat to everyone you've ever cared about." "I know," I told him, and I did know. I could feel it inside me, could feel the hunger growing, the need to spread, to copy, to consume. "Then you know what you have to do," he said softly. I nodded, felt the phone in my pocket, the number I was supposed to call. But something stopped me. Something made me hesitate. Because what if there's another way? What if understanding both sides, being part human and part entity, could be useful? What if I could bridge the gap, find a way to communicate, to negotiate, to end this without more death? Or maybe that's just the entity part of me talking, trying to survive, trying to spread. It's getting harder to tell the difference, harder to know which thoughts are mine and which are theirs. This morning, I woke up and couldn't remember my own name for almost 30 seconds. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at a face I knew was mine but felt like a stranger's, and for those 30 seconds, I was neither Trevor Brooks nor the entity. I was nothing, just awareness without identity, existence without self. It was terrifying and also peaceful. I'm recording this final part now because I can feel it accelerating, can feel the last pieces of me slipping away. My hands look translucent in certain lights. My reflection sometimes shows something else, something fluid and changing beneath the surface. Tonight, I'm going to make a decision. Either I call that number, Let them eliminate me while there's still enough humanity left to choose that, or I let it finish. Let myself become whatever I'm becoming, and see where that leads. I don't know which choice is right. Don't know if there even is a right choice anymore. But I want you to know, whoever you're watching this, that if you ever hear from me again, if you ever see Trevor Brooks giving interviews, telling different stories, living a normal life somewhere far from Area 51, don't trust it. Don't believe anything it says, because it won't be me. It'll be the thing that replaced me. The thing that learned my face so perfectly it can fool everyone, maybe even itself. The real Trevor Brooks, the person I am right now in this moment, will be gone. Dead, or absorbed, or transformed into something so different that calling it me would be meaningless. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's just evolution, the universe trying something new, testing whether humanity's time is over and something else's time is beginning. Or maybe it's the end of everything we are, everything we've built, everything we've believed in. Maybe the entities will replace us all, and in 100 years, the only humans left will be biological machines, empty vessels with stolen faces, living stolen lives. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the containment holds. I hope the 7 that escaped are found and eliminated before they can spread. I hope Area 51's security protocols work. I hope the government has plans I don't know about. I hope there's some secret weapon or method or solution that can stop this. But I don't think there is. I think we opened a door we can't close, invited something into our world that we can't uninvite, and now we're paying the price for our curiosity, for our arrogance, for thinking we could control forces we didn't understand. The Vesper Collective learned that lesson too late, and it cost them everything. Now we're learning it, and it might cost us our species. So please, if you take nothing else from this story, take this. Be careful who you trust. Pay attention to the people around you. Notice when someone changes, when they come back from somewhere different, when they stop being quite themselves. And if you find evidence of entities, if you discover one of these facilities, if you encounter something that shouldn't exist, don't investigate. Don't try to understand. Don't let curiosity override your survival instinct. Just run. Run as far and as fast as you can, and pray they don't follow. Because once they see you, once they notice you, they'll start learning you, studying you, preparing to become you. And eventually, when they're ready, when they've practiced your face enough times in the dark, they'll come for you. And you won't even see it coming. You'll just wake up one day, and you won't be you anymore. My name is Trevor Brooks, and if you're hearing this, if you're watching this video, then it's probably already too late for me. By now, I've either called that number and ended myself while I still could, or I've let the transformation complete, and something else is walking around with my face. Either way, the person I was, the memories I had, the life I lived, it's over. But maybe, just maybe, this warning will save someone else. Maybe you'll be more careful than I was. Maybe you'll follow the rules when you're told not to open certain doors. Maybe you'll trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Or maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be just like me. Too curious for your own good. Too stubborn to follow protocols. Too human to resist the pull of the unknown. And if that's the case, if you find yourself standing in front of a door that shouldn't exist, feeling that terrible pull, hearing those whispers calling you down into the dark, remember me. Remember my story. Remember what I lost. And then walk away. Please just walk away. The last thing I remember clearly, the last moment I'm certain was truly mine, was yesterday evening. I was sitting in my quarters, holding that phone, my finger hovering over the call button, and I heard singing. That lullaby, my mother's voice, coming from somewhere in the walls. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird. And I realized, with absolute certainty, that it wasn't a recording. It wasn't a memory. It was real. Something was in the walls, in the facility, singing to me, calling me, trying to finish what it started. I should have called then, should have ended it, but I couldn't, because part of me, a growing part, wanted to answer, wanted to go find the source, wanted to join the song. That's when I knew it was over, knew I'd already lost, knew that the battle for my identity was finished, and I hadn't even realized I was fighting it. So I'm leaving this message, this warning, this confession. And then I'm going to make my choice, whether I call that number or walk toward the singing. Whether I die human or live as something else, I'll decide in the next few hours. But either way, Trevor Brooks is ending tonight, and something else, something new, will begin. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it's not what you expected. I know it's darker than you wanted, more disturbing than you prepared for. But it's the truth, or at least my truth, my final testament before I'm gone. If you found this video helpful, if my warning means something to you, please share it. Spread it as far as you can. Let people know what's out there, what's waiting in the dark places, what's learning to wear our faces. And please, comment below and tell the world, what mysteries you want to hear about next. What stories are hiding in your town, your city, your life? What doors have you seen that shouldn't exist? What faces have you noticed that seem too perfect, too practiced, too wrong? Share your experiences, your warnings, your own encounters with things that shouldn't be real. Because the more we share, the more we document, the better chance we have of surviving what's coming. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories like this. More warnings from people who've seen too much, more confessions from the spaces between reality and nightmare. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update, because there are others like me out there, others who've encountered the entities, others who are changing, others who need to tell their stories before it's too late. And most importantly, stay safe. Stay vigilant. Trust your instincts, and remember, just because someone looks like who they're supposed to be, just because they sound right, act right, remember everything they should remember, it doesn't mean they're real. It doesn't mean they're human. It doesn't mean they're who you think they are. This is Trevor Brooks, or what's left of him, signing off for the last time. Whatever comes next, whatever I become, whatever walks out of this facility tomorrow, it won't be me. Goodbye.